Welcome, everybody, to podcast 183. We have Jake Williams with us today, and we're going to ask the question, do you have clarity on where you are in the process?
This is the Elevate Construction Podcast, delivering remarkable content for workers, leaders, and companies in construction wanting to take their next step. Get ready to step out of your comfort zone with Jason Schroeder as he encourages you to do better, live a remarkable life, and expect more. Let's go.
Okay, welcome, everybody. As I said, and as promised, we have Jake Williams. Jake, do you have anything you want to say hi to welcome yourself to everyone?
Good morning. Glad to be here. Excited to talk to you about this topic. It's important to me and has created a great impact in my life and the way I view things. So I'm really excited to share it with you.
And I'm excited too. And so by the time everyone hears this, it will be Monday morning. And so what better way to kick off the week than to talk to Jake? Last time we did this with Jake, we talked about Who Moved My Cheese, a fantastic book. And that podcast episode really soared through the roof. Lots of folks really got some value. And so we're here to do that again today. A couple of conversational things, Jake, that I wanted to hit before we get started is a question that I got from a podcast listener, a fan, if you will, asking what is changing, what do we see changing in the construction industry? And so instead of covering it once, I just have been adding it to every episode and covering one thing bit by bit. And so I'd like to kick that over to you today. What do you see changing in the construction industry? And take your time, no rush. I'd love your insights on that.
Well, changing is relative. I mean, I would think right now for me, the thing that I notice the most and is on my mind most is just the exit of really experienced people and not enough people to backfill the positions. And so the transference of that experience and knowledge from people that have been in the industry for 35, 40 years to the younger generation seems to be a little bit of a breakdown. I don't know if it's due to communication where there's a tech barrier and a lot of the communications happening, with younger people on the tech side and older people want to have conversations. I don't know why it exists, but that one concerns me the most and continues to get a lot of my attention and try to figure out how do we bridge that gap and get people get younger folks with the older and more experienced people and just make sure there's a good transference of information. Because I see some of these, people that I've respected for 20, 25, 30 years in the industry that are now leaving. And it's just, to me, it's like, how do we even keep them involved in mentoring and building and growing these people? Because the experience transference just isn't there. You see fewer and fewer real craftsmen, that know the trade and know the disciplines and the way that they did, 10, 15 years ago. So that one is concerning to me. And then, of course, projects just keep getting faster. Design keeps getting more integrated into the front end of projects where it's quite common for us to start projects that are, a month or two into design, and we're starting construction and trying to deal with bid packages and pricing and all that stuff on top of construction and just trying to figure out how to close the gap on that, make sure that we're and getting the owner the experience that they're looking for with such a close fit design and construction timeline.
I was listening to every part of that, and a guy named Charlie Dunn, a real good friend of mine that works at DPR, he did a podcast with me about 2021. Well, what he said, what would we say? Thank you for your answer, Jake. This spawned my thoughts right now. He said, Jason, let's think in 2030 or 2035 or 2040, what would we have said in the last 10, 15, 20 years was the most important thing that we did after 2020? And he said, in his mind, effective prefabrication would probably be on one of his top lists. But as you're listening here, probably, what's changing in the industry. So we have less workers, less qualified folks because they're leaving, and you called it an exodus. But also the integrated design hurts it as well, because if we were to say, okay, we have less folks in the field assembling, we're going to assemble more in the shop, the integrated design prevents us from having the time to do that almost, it's
Yeah, it takes it back to the field where you have to have the qualified people to put it in place. The design just doesn't happen quick enough. And what I see, a while for the prefabrication to really have the value that it should or could.
yeah. Well, that's definitely a problem for us to solve. I hadn't previously had that insight because I had my little comfort blanket saying, we can prefab it, but the way design, we're gonna have to fix one of them. We're gonna have to train people better and have a better group of folks to assemble it, or we're gonna have to fix the design piece. To your point. Okay, so here's the conflict, everybody. We're going to get right into this podcast. Do you know where you are in the process? And so Jake has us ready to go, queued up, so that he can talk about a story and then the principle. And then at the end of this podcast, we're going to talk about the current condition and the challenge that he has for us. So Jake, you want to take it away?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to talk about this. I'm going to just briefly share with you an experience that I had with my dad. He was in construction management for 25, 30 years before he retired and moved on. And I worked with him a lot when I was young in his construction company, doing all kinds of miscellaneous stuff. But I remember a specific story when I was about 16, where he asked me to install blocking at trusses at the rafter ridge line on a house. And I went to work on it, and I quickly assessed. I'm like, this is like going to get buried by insulation, eventually fascia, sheathing, and nobody's ever going to see this. So why does it matter? I'm going to do this as fast as I can and move on to something else. It wasn't very long into that, and I was doing a really, really poor job, where he came along and he's like, what are you doing? This doesn't look very good. And I said, well, I don't think it really matters. And it was at this point that he shared like one of what I consider pivotal life lessons that I still go back to in my world today. He said, we are seldom, if ever, able to achieve perfection with our work. But if we set our sights on anything else, we often miss the mark completely. And so that set the foundation for me. And it was the first big quality lesson, but I also applied it to everything else in life. And it really connects with a popular statement that you hear a lot now with like true north statements. Where are we going? Like, what does the perfect situation look like? And to me, that's the perfection conversation that I tied to this early conversation with my dad. It was like, I may not be able to get to that perfect place, but I still need to be shooting for it. And as long as I'm aligned and moving toward that, I'm always going to be putting my best foot forward. And that ties into this discussion for me, because it is a question of what does perfection look like depends on if we are really honest with assessing where we're at in the delivery process of the product that we're putting in place.
I love that.
And so it becomes really important at that point, because I, as an early, in my early construction career, I went through all the different trade type stuff, from pipe layer to cabinet maker to carpenter, steel erector, surveyor, all these things that were very like end user handing a product over that needed to be as perfect as it could be. And so my sights were set on like that perfect product and like, how do I make this as perfect as it can? Because I know I'm the last QA person that's touching this before it has major impact on something. But when I had to turn a corner when I took my first superintendent position, because I realized pretty quickly at that point, I still had my total station underneath the desk. I still like to get out and do my own survey. I still like to go out and actually build, put wall forms in place and even vibrate concrete once in a while. And I did all these kind of things because I was like, man, I add a lot of value here. But what I missed is that in doing that, it distracted me and pulled me away from the things that were important. And I was missing my spot in the process. And so that took me from my position, where I had to realize, hey, I'm a little bit further up in the process, or earlier up the river, if you were, in the development process. And I need to be the one that's doing the pre-work planning for these, people in the field, and be able to put this in place where hey, what do I need to make work ready in the future for these folks that are out there doing that? So I was failing that spot, but it made me realize that, hey, I need to get further upstream. And then moving a little bit further in my career, then I realized that I was spending way too much time in perfecting things. And I didn't realize then, or nearly as soon as I ought to have, that where am I at in the line? You know, am I the first person that's touching a product that's going to go through 3 or 4 more hands to get to the final product? And if I am, how perfect does it need to be? And if I focus on the perfection and getting it to the level where I think it's like ready for a delivery for an end product use, am I now taking away the opportunity from all the other people that should have opportunity for their own innovation and creativity to come and apply to the process and add and make it better? And so I had to quickly start reassessing my position and still today thinking about where am I at in the process? How good does it have to be? Is it just general guidelines? You know, if you think about a true north, it's like, this is the vision of where I want it to head. This is the rough guidelines. I'm going to hand it to you, and it's still going to have some rough edges because that's important for you to look at it now. And you knock off a rough edge, you hand it to the next person, and just realize it's going to go along, and you're guiding that process from an earlier standpoint. And so if we don't do that, then we spend way too much trying to be perfect in what we're doing. That's one of my big handicaps. And that delays the handoff to the next person that should be working on it, which is delegation, which is important for leaders that want to keep growing their career. And you got to really realize that your first round is a rough draft. You're not doing a final presentation. It's not the final product. If you're further up in the development line. So we can't focus on taking it to that polished, perfect state because it means that we're committing way too much of our time doing that, like final polishing, finishing, when we really are the rough draft people. And you can think about that as a superintendent. There's oftentimes where you have foremans and you have assistant superintendents and you have project engineers in some cases. And sometimes it's a handoff between a superintendent, even at a senior level, to a senior project manager, where it's like, hey, I've added all of my really special value to this. Here, can you take it and add your touches to it? And now we're going to have something. And that can be in, rough drafting emails and being like, I've got this as good as I can from my perspective. Add your perspective point in it and let's send off something that's perfect, that actually meets the need.
I love that. And a lot of time that I've spent, did I interrupt you, by the way, Jake? Or
no, you're good.
Awesome. So a lot of time recently, the book Elevating Construction Superintendents is for assistant supers and supers, right? So I've been fielding a lot of questions of what does it take for a super 1 or 2 to go to a 3, according to FMI. And I mentioned things like delegation, visual communication, planning, having healthy conflict, speaking up, drive, tenacity, things like that. Also, to your point, you just hit on a huge one is, if you're not you, but if somebody listening or a super 1 or super 2 or super 3, if you're heading in the direction of being a super 4 or a senior superintendent, whatever that lead superintendent is, can you take scopes of work and do enough high-level planning to where they're queued up with manpower, materials, and information, but not do so much of it to where you do it for the assistant supers, where they can take it and actually drive down into the details, right? That's kind of an art. And that hit on one of the main things that people are going to have to learn as they go from the doing to the leading, right? So I love that concept. And then I just want to say one thing, and then any thoughts that come your way. You reminded me of the envelope game. Have you heard of that one, Jake? That lean game? So the envelope game, we played it at the PE boot camp to talk about flow and submittals, but the concept is that, and people actually experiment with it. It's pretty neat. One person, we say, all right, here's a piece of paper, an envelope, and a stamp. And then the second person, same thing. We have, we have 20 pieces of paper, 20 envelopes, and 20 stamps, right? So each person has 20. And we tell one person, you fold the papers into a trifold all at once. Do that. And then when you're done folding the papers, then stuff them into the envelope. When you're done stuffing all 20, then lick them. When you're done licking all of them, this was pre-COVID-19, by the way. And when you're done licking them, and that's gross anyway, I think we should rethink that. But now stamp them all. And then this person, we said, okay, pick up a piece of paper, trifold it, stuff it in the envelope, lick it, and put the stamp on it, and then put it over to the right, right? And the game is like they start playing and it's like close, and the person that's batching, the one I don't know if you can see me, but the one that's doing everything in batches looks like he or she's going to win, and everyone's getting really nervous, but really the one that picked up one and just took it all the way to the end, for each one of them finishes like 2 to 3 minutes before the other one. Like it's not even close. And even today, after I've done that exercise, that activity, probably 20 times, I still get nervous because it looks, I'm like, is something in physics going to change here? It looks so horrifically slow to do things one piece at a time. But it's to your point, is if you don't get, first of all, if you're batching things, you're taking extra time. And then to your point, if you don't push that down the flow right away, one piece at a time, one piece flow, I'm going to produce my draft and let the other person look at it sooner, quicker, like you said, then you're not only handling it more times than you need to, but it's also delayed. Right. And so it reminds me of that envelope game. And so what I picked up from what you said is when you're shooting for a flow and you're further up in the process, at the beginning steps, quicker is better. Did I get that right, Jake?
Yeah. And it also, I think it, in most cases, improves the quality of the end product because it moves it along. The assumption that one person does everything means only one person's touching it and like getting their stamp of perfection. But when you pass it through 3 people, they're each doing something perfect and what they're really suited to do, and you end up with a far better final product.
Yeah.
And a lot of times when we pass stuff to other people in our, roles in our professions, they assume that, hey, Jason did that or Jake did that. It's already perfect. I didn't even look at it.
Ooh.
And sometimes when we take it to that point, like that's a huge like blunder on our part to not pass them on and say, this is not perfect. I expect you to go through here and knock off some rough edges and make sure that it's, that you think it's perfect. That you aren't just thinking that I covered it all.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to write that down. So I'm typing right now. So faster win in the beginning and communicate that this is a draft, right? Yeah. And that it needs to be perfected. So I'd like to, and Jake, do you mind if let me ask you this, and if there's more you want to cover before we do this, let me know. But I'd like for you and me to give examples. Like I'd give an example and then kick it over to you, and then we just go until we can exhaust it. Would that be okay with you?
Sure.
So here's one example that came to me after I listened to you. Lift drawings. I remember, well, in some jobs, and I was working on this particular project where it's like, yeah, somebody detailed out the lift drawings, but they weren't ready for the craft when it was time. And the reason was they were taking so long to perfect. And to queue up this process better, we said, okay, if you're in the initial draft stage, we need to get that out to the foreman or the other field engineers or the superintendent. Actually, all 3 of those folks should review that, even if it's a little page flip. But we need to get these out quicker because it's taking so long to perfect them, and we're not getting that second set of eyes. And then when we do get the second set of eyes, the revisions are taking too long. So we said, hey, can you please get these out sooner? And then it was like, this is a perfect example, actually. So it was like, well, we don't have the sleeve drawings. We hear that every time, right? Anytime we're doing lift drawings, we don't have the sleeve drawings from the MEP folks. We don't have the embeds for the curtain wall, the shop drawings for them yet. I can't give you a draft. And we're like, no, put big black letters. And this ties back to your point, Jay. Big black letters, draft. Do not use, right? And get that lift drawing out there for us to start reviewing and marking up and everything. And once that happened, it got the process to where we were actually able to get the lift drawings before construction. That's a perfect example in my mind of your point. Know where you are in the process. So yeah. I like that one. So do you have a thought on your end?
No, for sure. Scheduling comes to mind for me. As a young superintendent, I spent hours, weeks sometimes, like making what I thought was the perfect schedule without involving any of the trade partners in the discussion. And then going to them and they're like, well, you don't know what you're talking about. This is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. So I quickly learned that it's like way better in scheduling to, hey, let's give them the big buckets of time and how they interact with each activity or trade before and after them, and let them help us refine the minor details inside, or the fine details to figure out the plan. And that's like an example of, hey, I don't need to spend days getting a perfect schedule. I need to get it scrapped out to where I know the big pieces, earthwork to foundation, foundation to structure, that they're pretty close to where I need them to be. And then I need to involve other people in the process and hand that off. And that's a very quick process to get to that point. And the same with logistics planning, or, figuring out your trade specific work areas and things like that. Quickly putting your ideas on paper, whether it's some blue beam or marking stuff up or a quick CPM schedule or tack plans or whatever, and getting it to the next person in line for feedback is invaluable, because now you're bringing more people into the process and starting to develop a lot better product than you're ever going to be, no matter how much experience you have in the industry, than what you get if you involve other people.
I'm like tickled to death with that example. And I love that you mentioned the tack plans, right? So I've got three things because your point was so good. Three things before I go on to mine. You and I, and actually where I heard this example of where are you in the process, I think was when you and I actually dealt with a situation where the scheduling wasn't getting done, and we had to remind that professional individual that he was in draft mode and needed to get it out. I don't know if I remember that exactly right, but the scheduling example is perfect. And I remember I won't say the job, but there was a super that was going to oversee the interiors and just kept reviewing and revising the plan. And finally I created a tack plan for the interiors because I needed to know how I tied in with all the MEP systems. And so I created a plan, and I remember him criticizing me. He's like, Jason, you can't do this and hand this to somebody. And I'm like, dude, I got to know when we need chilled water, and I need to know when we need air on. I have to know these things. And so I was going back and forth to the trailer for the mechanical and plumbing folks, and we got a plan together. And the senior superintendent asked the other super and I to go on a walk one day, and he was like, Jason, you're now in control of all of the interiors, and you aren't. And then the other super, as we were walking, was like, well, what about this? And the senior super was like, you don't need to worry about that anymore. Jason's got it. And I'm like, okay, so you just transferred at not as a win, but $30 million more oversight into my realm as an assistant superintendent, because I was already attacking the plan, right? And this other person was taking too long. And that was such a moment for me where I'm like, oh yeah, I get it. And I want your insights on this, please. I think it's because leaders need something to review. And I want to say that there are leaders out there that when they expect to see something from you, they want it perfect. I particularly don't enjoy working for those folks, but if you're working for that person, then be careful. But if you're working for a boss and you're in, that you're early on in the process, and that boss also knows that you're in that part of the process, I think it's so much easier for them to have something to review. Like if somebody's like, hey, Jason, I'm having a hard time with this, what goes on here? And I'm like, no, give me something to review. Even if it's garbage, they're like, well, I'm not done yet. No. Even if it's a white piece of paper, I need something in front of me to redline, And I don't know, is that your experience too, Jake, that you would rather have something to review and have it out earlier, or is your style a little bit differently? Talk to me about that.
No, absolutely agree. As long as it's earlier.
Okay, in that process.
The only place I get frustrated is if it's, there's a week to put something together and a week goes by and on the last day you get a really rough draft. That shows that it's like not collaborative. It's like it comes across as being like a poorly completed project. But if it's early involvement, that's very different. I love it when someone sends it through early in the process and is very clear that, hey, I wanted to get something to you to make sure I'm headed in the right direction. This is a rough draft, but this is where I'm going. Does it align with your vision and where you thought it was going?
Yep.
And that is really helpful to me because then I have a chance to touch it, and other people in the process are the same way. The other one, you hit on the drafting. The drafting was the one that set me free on perfection. Like the idea that you can put draft on there and communicate it clearly to who it's going to. And this can include owners. It has a lot for me in the past where it was schedules and logistics and quality plans, whatever. Just a quick narrative like, hey, this is a rough draft. I'm finalizing it, but I wanted to get it to you early so you have some input. I value your opinion and process. You have insights to bring. Help me get this right. And they don't have to. And sometimes they're like, no, go do your damn job and bring it back to me. And that's fine too. But you still gave them the opportunity to do that. And it's huge. The drafting just really set you free. I would just consider, like, for yourselves, think about the drafting applying to everything if you can get it out quick. Mm-hmm. Because if you can get it out quick with a draft stamp on it or draft verbiage in email or attachment, whatever, where you're returning product and showing people work, it also shows people how, that you're busy working on the things that are important to them. You're not going silent for 2 or 3 days at a time or a week or a month, and they're wondering, where's Jake at with that? I don't know. I haven't seen anything. It's just a constant update, and they can choose to read it or not, but you're still being really transparent in the progression of the project.
Yep.
So that's been a big deal for me.
I love that. And as a customer, I've had websites developed and products developed and graphics and stuff. And my message is always, 3 days go by and I'm like, where are we? Well, we're not done. I didn't want to see it done. I want to see where you are, because once it's, and that's another thing you're saying, Jake, is that especially if I'm the customer, if I don't see it in its draft forms, then what happens when it's wrong, when it heads my way? I either have to buy the dang thing or waste another 3 days or you know what I mean? Like, I'm in a bad spot, but if I had gotten revisions, then I can steer it the whole time.
Yeah. I have one more example with an owner who's a pretty tough owner. He's the first one that was finally like, pulled it to me in a way that I got it. And it was this. When I was working on something in a silo and trying to get it perfect and then handing it to him, he says, when you do that, it makes me feel like you don't value my input in the process. And it came across, it's the first time that I connected it with arrogance. I have all the answers. I know what needs to be done. I'm going to tell you at some point what we're doing. I'm not going to bring you in and collaborate with you and accept that you have a lot of value that you can add to the process too.
Yeah.
And when I started thinking about it, I don't want to be arrogant and like assume that I know everything, was when it opened up for me too, where I'm like, share, open it up, involve the owner. If they don't want to be, that's fine, but you still invited them to the table. You still invited the trade partner to the table. You still invited the design team, and you ask them for their opinion and let them help part of shaping the process. You don't need to do it alone. It's not fair to us, and it's not fair to them, because we're saying they don't have anything to add.
This might be one of our best podcasts this year. Like that right there. The other thing is it's not only can be somewhat arrogant, but it lacks trust, right? It lacks transparency. It lacks. So basically, when we're deciding, like, maybe it's by accident, right? But if we're deciding to do that, then most of the deciding is probably, and you and I know that it's not all logical. When we make decisions, it could be by accident. But if we're deciding, it could be fear-based, and it's more of a fixed mindset instead of a growth mindset, right? Fixed mindset people, and I've been there, want to have significance and praise from people for being perfect and wonderful and amazing, because that's where they get their self-esteem or their significance. But growth mindset people are addicted to the learning process and getting better. And those are the people that will take it all the way.
Yeah.
And so I love that. One time somebody was saying, well, I can't put in, and I'm not entirely right about this, but let me go on this little bit of a rant to go on your scheduling example. And then I've got one more, is that somebody creating a master schedule in P6 was like, I don't know exactly what will eventually happen with design on this. I don't want to plug that activity in there. And this had been like the 5th time we were talking about it. And I'm like, I got a little annoyed. That's not real leadership on my part, but I wasn't mean. I was just passionate. I was like, guys, This whole schedule is one big wild cuss word guess. The whole thing. And it's always going to be that. We don't have production rates. We don't have exact details. We don't know what's going to happen day to day. We don't know what's going to change. We don't know what changer. The whole fornicating thing is a guess. Why are you so freaked out about that? And finally, to your point, I was like, if you're going to plug in an activity and you don't at least have trade input, write down, say bracket, to be verified in bracket, right? On the end of the activity. And that's, to your point, how you can put draft anywhere. You can put it on a drawing. Yeah. You can put it in an email. You can, to your point, in the subject of an email, you can put draft. You can put a P6 activity that at the end of it says draft. And I was just like, I hope nobody in this industry thinks that a master schedule is anything but a guess, like, why are we so freaked out? Let's get something to the best of our knowledge. Anyway, that's my example. What's an example that you would give? And I think I probably can get one more.
I want to talk quality really quick, and then I have one more.
Go ahead.
Quality is another one. Like we do pre-installation meetings, with our company. And I was talking to a project engineer a few weeks or a month or so back, and the process is going a little bit slow. We're having a hard time getting people to the meeting. And then when I went to a meeting, I found that it was a presentation to the experts in the room. Ooh. And therein lied the problem. It was like, wait, and then I pulled him aside. I'm like, we don't need to, he felt like he needed to have all the answers and be able to present all of the, hey, this is how we're going to do this. This is the strategy for this. This submittal plugs into this. This is how this goes. I researched this. That he had to have all this information and go educate the 30, 40, 50-year experts that were coming to the table. And I said, no, your job is to facilitate the meeting, get it set up, make sure the right people are there that have the knowledge to bring and share, make sure that all the documents are online and that we have all the material to discuss. Then we're facilitating the meeting and letting the experts help us identify and come out with lessons learned, templates. That's just pulling it all from the right side. Now we're getting the input from the actual people that are putting the work in and know what they're doing. And that speeds up the process and gets all the right information out to the field where we can actually build it correctly. So we don't want those to be presentations. And that was an example, another where he was trying to do a really good job, but it was taking so long. And it was his perception from 5 years in the industry, not harnessing the 30, 40, 150 years of experience in the
And actually, to your point, not only are we attempting to not slow it down with perfection as a presentation, but we're actually attempting as far as we can to get the trades to participate in those meetings, right? To review the plans and specs and highlight them themselves before the meeting, right? And to get buy or weigh in so that they can buy in. So I love that point. Is not only should we listen to your counsel, Jake, but that's actually what we're attempting to do. Like with our scheduling, the more weigh-in people have, the more they're going to buy in. With quality, the more weigh-in, the more buy-in. The more weigh-in, the more buy-in. So, yeah, taking everybody together, huge point. I love that. Anything else with that topic, Jake?
I got one more that I want to touch on.
Okay.
Just really quickly on the draft thing because it popped into my head. I think it's important. I was listening to a book recently where the author talked about how long it took him to write it, and that he spent over 6 years drafting this book, and that it went through countless. And the pressure of issuing a final draft for publication is what held him back. Was the idea that this is done, like the idea that, hey, this is like what the whole world's going to see. I'm never going to be able to touch it again. It's done. And so he was willing over 6 years, what ended up being an almost perfect book on year one. He went through 6 years of draft without being willing. And finally, he got the right publisher that's like, you can call it a draft if you want. You can rewrite it and do another revision to it. You can keep working with it. You can write another book. If you want to think of it as a draft, it's not a finished thing. Yeah. And it took all the pressure off him of feeling like it needed to be perfect. And he was willing to put it out there to the world, and it ended up being a huge bestseller book.
Amen.
So that was interesting. It took the pressure, and for me, it's the same thing. Like the idea of it doesn't have to be the final thing. It never should be thought of the final thing. It kind of takes that pressure off of having to be 100%.
I, I hope I'm not wasting your time with this, but I've got a kind of an example with that. Um, and I'm not advocating what I did, but the when Elevating Construction Superintendents came out, there was a duplicate word on the back cover. And I had attempted to get it out fast because I had promised it that. And I felt like people would benefit. And I'm kind of like a Paul Akers, Gary V kind of a guy. Produce content. If there's mistakes in there, people will forgive you. That's not super professional, but that's me, right? And I'm realizing that I'm good at a lot of things, and I'm not good at finding grammatical errors, spelling errors, or duplicate words. I'm like, even the other day, I found in a presentation, I was spelling warranty with 2 E's instead of a Y. And then I was like, okay, I got it now. And then they're like, well, actually there's 2 R's. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Anyway, so I got this book out, and there was probably 89 copies that went out with this error. And I found it. And so to your point, I went on Fiverr. I got the corrections on the graphic on the back, and I uploaded it to the KDP website. And so all new books will go out with the corrections. And so anybody ordering the book will get it, in beautiful, perfect form. But not only was it not hard to update, but the feedback that I got from the first 89 books was, I love this book. This is great. I read it every morning. Nobody said anything about the error. And they were very kind and generous. And actually, Brandon teased me because I brought it up to him and hurt my feelings. But actually, nobody really cared. Everybody cared about the content. And so that was an eye opener for me. I'm not advocating that we send out typographical errors and stuff like that, but I was just overwhelmingly surprised by the charity and the focus of the people reading the book, that they were there for the information. They were there for whatever they could glean, and they were willing to be charitable and kind about any minor errors.
Yeah.
And so one thing that I had was I'm developing training. I do a lot of training development with people. Instead of just like doing a training for them, I develop it with them. So companies will say, hey, let's develop our own super boot camp or our own training system or whatever. And I was with a client the other day, and we were in the brainstorming. So it's great to do a brainstorming, sticky on the whiteboard session, and then to start to create a storyboard, and then to go into outlining, and then to put it into the training matrix, and then to start drafting content. There's a process to this that works every time, right? We were in the brainstorming process, and there was a guy that was and he was doing a great job, so I'm not criticizing him, but he was like, no, we can't do that, no, that. And I'm like, no. We're just in brainstorming process. We're not in the get it down on time. We're not in the, hey, how are we going to deploy this now? We're just in the brainstorming. And over and over and over, we kept encouraging this person to say, no, can you please just throw everything on the wall? And it made me realize that there are people that work from the end backwards. And we need those people in life. They're great. And because I work start front, we need those different perspectives. But it was very much helpful at the end of the day. We ended up in a spot where we were able to get everything out of his mind by reminding him where he was in the process. So that's my last example. Do you have any others, Jake, that you want to share, or are you spent too?
No, I'm spent.
Okay.
Good chat.
Yeah. And I think we're at perfect timing here, by the way, too. So if I had to ask you, what is the current condition? So we just talked about ideal state. Can you briefly describe, a couple sentences, whatever, what is our current condition? And then the challenge you would issue. That's how I like to close these podcasts out, because we said, here's a story, here's the solution. Why is the solution applicable? Here's the current condition. And according to that, here's the challenge of how you can change to get to the ideal state. Do you mind doing that, Jake? Current condition and the challenge?
Yeah, absolutely. So the current condition is maybe finding yourself overwhelmed, overcommitted, underutilizing people around you, and not really understanding how to change that or what to do about it. I oftentimes hear that, which is, I know I have these people, but I'm not really sure how to use them. I know I'm not utilizing fully? How do I do it? And it ties back really well to my concern that I talked about in the beginning of the podcast is the training of people. I have a concept that just popped into my head this last week, which is this, when early in your career, you're really focused a lot on growing yourself and on perfecting this model of who you are and how you fit into the system. The further you get in your career, and especially if you have the opportunity to mentor younger people that are coming up behind you, the more you have to start looking out to those and spreading the knowledge and mentoring and growing. And so if you find yourself in that spot where you're overwhelmed and just have too many things to do, ask yourself that question, that leader question. What should I be doing that other people just can't do or won't do? Mm-hmm. And what can I hand to somebody else that would give them the opportunity to contribute to the end product? And that will help you assess your place in the line and make sure that you're really performing where your position has the most impact. That's the key, is like finding where do I as a person, where am I able to contribute the most impact to the success of the team? And sometimes that's backing up and making sure that you're in the place of the line, and then looking at your people and making sure that they're in the right place in the line. Mm-hmm. And it's just you talk about flow, we talk about flow and schedule all the time. That is team flow. That's just looking at your team and like, how is the flow of information, the development of answers, process, ideas, health, the whole thing, how is that flowing through your team? And so that would be my challenge and what to do moving forward, is just to ask yourself, look at yourself honestly at your lists and start seeing, which ones should I really be doing? Which ones am I only able to do? Which ones can I not get anybody else to do? And then how do I start helping other people do that? And look at your team flow. Hopefully that makes sense and helps.
It makes perfect sense to me. And Jake, just some direct feedback, like this is going to be one of the best podcasts this year. So I know that you probably have more of a humble opinion about it, but this right here, these kinds of concepts, and I love that we stuck with one instead of going, to too many where it's like, I can't implement all this stuff. This has been one of the best podcasts that I've done this year, or will be, and it's super helpful, and I appreciate you being on. And I just can't say enough good things. I'm super excited. And so we have a little bit of a tradition. So on the count of 3, I'm going to say on we go. So I'll count and say it with me, Jake. 1, 2, 3. On we go.
On we go.
Please join us next time in elevating the entire construction experience for workers, leaders, and companies coast to coast. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to share with your construction colleagues and help us spread the word by rating, subscribing, and leaving a review on your preferred podcast listening platform. We really appreciate it. We'll catch you next time on the Elevate Construction Podcast.